Thank you all for joining us. I'm Doug Clark. I direct the Center for Near Eastern Archaeology here at La Sierra University, and I'm joined by Caitlin Sattelmeyer, who is the curatorial assistant at the center. And so we will be introducing the program. First of all, let me welcome everyone. It's great to see you. It's great to be able to share what the Center for Near Eastern Archaeology is doing in its various projects. Look forward to spending this time together with you for the next hour. Don Acevedo, who is also on the team putting this presentation and this evening event together, is in Dallas, Texas, and she will be monitoring the chat box. And when it comes time for questions and answers at the end of our presentations, she will be the one feeding those to us. So welcome. And Caitlin, why is it that we are here?
Well, the Center for Near Eastern Archaeology is so happy to partner with Giving Day at La Sierra University. We are dependent on donations for our existence. And with these donations, we are able to provide assistance for students in the form of employment and scholarships, as well as funding for our next archaeology discovery weekend, the continued inventory and curation of our library and research materials, and support for our 4 archaeological projects in Jordan. We are so excited that you have joined us this evening, and we are delighted to connect with you and, of course, share our love for archaeology.
Thank you, Caitlin. You have shared your love for archaeology very well, and ours. So what I'm going to do is pull up a PowerPoint. Giving Day is something that we try to do every year, and it turns out that Giving Day is probably the most important occasion for pulling together several fundraising events throughout the year. So thank you for joining us for that. Let's then think about the various projects that we are up to, the mischief that we are up to. Titled, and this title we owe to Don Acevedo in Texas, What Happens in Jordan Does Not Stay in Jordan. CNEA project updates. So these are the 4 major projects, and we will talk about all of them, and actually a bonus project too that we will mention toward the end of our program. And then when we finish presenting each of these, presented by different people, although we are shorthanded for this particular evening due to illness on the part of some, due to the fact that 2 of the presenters are deans of schools here at La Sierra. There are 4 schools at La Sierra, and the deans of 2 of them happen to be busy about this time of the year, and so we may not be able to hear from them. In any case, at the end of the presentations, Dr. Larry Garrity, who has been kind of Mr. Archaeology for, okay, I'm trying to think of the number of years. Larry is sitting next to me, but we'll bring him in a minute. But I think back to the 60s is when you actually began. So, and been president of La Sierra University and is now president of the University Foundation Board. We'll turn to him after these presentations. So let me start with the Matava Plains Project, Mary. The Matava Plains Project actually includes several major projects and is extended over the last 50 years. We're actually in the process right now of editing and publishing the 50th anniversary volume of the Matava Plains Project. And so the Ameri part of it, along with Heshban, Tel Heshbon, and Tel Jalul, the Ameri part lasted from 1984 to 2016. And the updates I want to bring are the following, and they're listed here. Open dig moves to open context. I'll show you what that means. Then a few words about Matava Plains Project, Ameri publications. A note or 2 about storytelling. This is a new dimension that I was introduced to, at least regarding Ameri, in the last couple of weeks. I've done some of that myself, but I was introduced to a very nice way of doing this. We'll come to that in a moment. And then some research on ancient sheep and goats. So here we go with the Matava Plains Project, Tel El Ameri. Located, as you can see on this map, we'll come back to this map several times. We will continue to add the project so that you see where we are geographically. What I mentioned about open dig moving to open context, we invented open dig a number of years ago. Matt Vincent, who was on our project, who is one of the high-tech people and specialists, invented OpenDig. We've now moved to a wider platform called Open Context. And that context allows us to post anything and everything about the Mataba Plains Project excavations at Tel El Ameri. And so I'm going, in the next screen, you'll see one of the pages. So you can go on this website, and it's open source. Anybody can do this. And you can see in the screen here, and if you can see my cursor, if I wanted to go to this object right here, I know the type is small and maybe really small on your screen, B160034A. B means it's an object that the country of Jordan wants to keep for museum possibilities. 16, the year 2016, and then a 4-digit number, and A, sometimes we have split, we'll have a B and a C perhaps for the same object. And you can see the object, although it's just very small here. But if I clicked on the object here, I'd get a larger picture and all the data that we own about that particular object. So this has really revolutionized what we can do and what our specialists can do when they are publishing their materials. The next item on the Ameri list has to do with publications. And this is sort of impressionistic in that you see this sheet full of publications that we're doing. In a way, we want it to be impressionistic because we are busy. We have an office and a manager of publications, Monique Roddy at Walla Walla University. And so she and several of us who've worked with the project are working on these publications. And you can see on the left-hand side, there are all kinds of books that we're doing. These are seasonal by year that we excavate. And then here is our set of final publications, 7 in all. They will involve specialists like all of those listed here in their various specialties. So it's a lot of work, and it will, over time, create probably one of the most comprehensive reports of any archaeological dig, along with others that we have from the Mataba Plains Project. So we're happy about that. Again, a lot of work, but it's the right thing to do. This slide represents a slide that Monique Roddy showed at the annual meeting of the American Society of Overseas Research a few weeks ago. The meeting was in Chicago, and she was talking about women and their work in especially dealing with olives. And so these 3 vessels on the upper and right-hand side are basins for separating olive oil from water. In fact, you can see in the picture on the right upper, there's a little hole that's actually made in the fabric of the pottery before it's fired, because you can plug that, and then when you put the oil that you've squeezed and the material, then the oil floats to the top, and of course the water is down below, and you can drain out the water. These separation craters are used significantly, and all 3 of these were found in one house. And so what Monique did was to say, I'm going to write a story about the women who use these things. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. That would take too long. And I don't want to read a whole lot on a Zoom presentation anyway, but she calls it 3 Craters, a story of women and domestic worship in the Iron Age. I do wish I had time to read from it, but it's a great story. It takes us into the world, the human world of women living in 1200 BC at our site of Ameri. Monique did her doctoral dissertation at the University of Chicago on this particular settlement, and she knows very well what she's speaking about. And now to create a narrative. And so I've suggested that in our final volumes, we include stories. Okay, it's all technical jargon and reports and photos and diagrams. I want some stories in there. So we're going to have some stories in those final volumes as well. And then finally, some research that's been done recently on sheep and goat bones, especially mandibles and teeth, by Richard Pearson, who is a student at the University College London, did his master's research on these. And in the process, he produced a master's thesis that was awarded several different awards for the quality of its work. He now is going to be doing a PhD on these same bones and extend the possibilities. With his study on strontium isotopes, he could tell where these sheep and goats had been. And he determined that many of them came from 100 kilometers away. So he can talk about trade, he can talk about people bringing things for feasts and so on. So he's now going to expand that with different techniques and different results and expanded results. Okay, so Balua Regional Archaeological Project. Kent Bramlett is here joining me, and his class is right over here watching.
They are.
Thank you for letting us interrupt your class. Thank
That's
you
all right.
for taking the time. Okay, we're okay with that. Okay.
Yeah.
So Kent has agreed to provide a few slides of the Balua project. So we just looked at the Mary project. Now the Balua project, which is much more field oriented at this point, right?
It is. It's a large site, and so we have just a few areas that are active archaeologically.
Right. So here we're putting it on the map along with Ameri
Excellent.
to show sort of where it is. I mean, it's tucked up against that bend in the large Wadi Mujib, isn't it?
Right.
So that's a bit impressionistic too. Okay, now.
This was our team last time we were in the field. We are planning for a season this coming summer. We're hopeful that that will work out well, and we're making active plans. But you can see our happy group there. We are sitting on one of the major actual components of Balua. We call it the Qasr, which is Arabic for a large structure. These are the universities and the people and some of the groups that we work with and that we are associated with. So Monique, Roddy, Freebert Nino, and I are the co-directors. La Sierra is the major sponsor along with the other schools listed there. And of course, the Department of Antiquities of Jordan. Okay, so going back to the aerial view, you can see the Dead Sea. And Amman to the north, the large sprawling gray urban zone, practically engulfs Umeri now, which is a part of the issues with the land ownership we ran into. So we are further south, and in the middle there, just to the east of the Dead Sea, is the large canyon, the Wadi Mujib, that divides the Ard al-Karak or the Karak Plateau, where we work, from the areas to the north. Let's go to the next screen where we can actually see a map with names that you might recognize on it. So Balua there is circled in gold. And we think it's a major site. We don't know the biblical association. We think though it might be one of the two major cities that are often mentioned in parallel. Er of Moab and Kir of Moab, these two great cities. Both of them actually mean a large walled city or town. And Balua has monumental architecture and art. Look at there, the top right is the Balua Stela, and then a type of stone capital on top of columns there in the lower right. These are associated with royal cities. So we're hopeful that it was a very important city of the ancient biblical Moabites.
Now, these were from Balua and related to the nearby, what's the name of the site that Jared Mattingly and so on?
Yeah, well, Mudebi.
Mudebi.
Yeah, a number of sites in Moab, actually, and also Wadi Themed had one of these capitals. We call them Proto-Ionic or Aeolic capitals. They developed into the Greek Ionic style later on in through this east-west connection through Anatolia. But yeah, they were associated with royal cities, Ammonites as well as Israelites and Judahites. Okay, so here's the actual archaeological site. It's on a tertiary tributary to the Dead Sea. It goes down through another wadi and into the Wadi Mujib. But the ancient road of the Iron Age, the biblical period, probably came up following this wadi system to cross up into the plateau, the farmland of Moab here. And that's why the white arrow is pointing to the entryway. That's probably where the gate was. We see rock cut elements and staircase or ramps that would have been a major north-south roadway. The three areas we're going to look at briefly, the Qasr, the house, and the wall, are the areas that we've been investigating. So you think about an ancient city, what do you want? Let's go back one screen real quick. How do you get a snapshot of its history? Well, you investigate the fortifications. So that's why we have the wall area there, actually dividing the older part of the city with the eastward expansion in yellow there. You want to investigate the domestic settlement area. So we have a house. It's actually a fairly large house complex, and maybe some royal architecture like a palace or a temple. And the Qasr is our best candidate for royal architecture. So those are the reasons that we chose the three areas that we did.
So what about the Islamic village? Where would that be located, and what's happening there?
Right. So we wanted to really sample everything at once. We couldn't do that initially, but we have expanded now into the Islamic village. You can see there outside of the blue in the lower left hand of your screen. That's part of it. It's not all of it, but Ian Jones, an Islamic specialist, is leading the investigation there. Actually, there's a caravanserai just off the screen to the west, to the left. That is the location of the initial work. And there's Roman pottery as well in some other areas. Okay, so here's the first of those three major areas, the Qasr, this administrative structure, and visitors to the site ever since it was more widely recognized by traveling archaeologists the last 100 years have always asked, when does it date to? What time period? Is it Hellenistic, or is it Bronze Age, or somewhere in between? We are trying to get at that answer, and we think that we have identified when it was constructed, but that was a lot of work because of all the tumble. So you can see the red arrow pointing down to the field where we're excavating, and we have a picture here of some of our work area. Excavating up against the outside of a building, that's not ideal. The best way to learn the history of the structure would be to excavate inside the walls. Well, we can't because of these massive multi-ton. A rough estimate was 2 or 3 tons, just on the specific gravity of basalt and limestone. Any rate, outside is second best, but we think we've identified foundational elements establishing it about the 9th century, which was a period when the Moabites were nation building, or they're constructing their polity.
You were originally thinking earlier.
Yes, we had thought earlier. Some had published. Other people had also suggested a minority view would be quite a bit later, and we simply didn't know. But right now, it's looking like it's
demonstrated it pretty clearly
from this place, unless we have additional information that provides another perspective. But yeah, last season we did have some interesting finds. These large storage jars were buried in the floor of a structure, which was fairly high up in the layers of buildings that are preserved there. There's about 3 or 4 construction levels of different buildings, and this is from the later part of the Iron Age. So we're talking 6th century, maybe even into the 5th century BC. So 600s, 500s, even maybe 400s. Anyway, you can see on the right-hand side that we were successful in putting together one of those storage jars, a couple of them. And interestingly, one of them was buried upside down, and we think that it was used as an oven. So the top part was probably removed, and it was used as some sort of oven. The house area, the domestic district that we're investigating, continues and continues. The walls just don't stop. We thought we had 2 or 3 rooms. Through 2 or 3 seasons of work, we keep discovering that no, the rooms don't end here. And we have doorways with the lintels, the top capping stones over the doorway are still intact. That's quite rare to have fieldstone constructed walls that are preserved up to that level of preservation. And there's actually 4. There's a couple more doorways that we think we know of. So this is really exciting. We're trying to understand the use of the building. Let's go to the next screen. We can see we've listed the rooms, and by looking carefully at the artifacts, and we don't have a lot of whole artifacts, but there's some ground stone artifacts. There's broken pottery, maybe part of a taboon or a clay oven. And from that, we hope to be able to plot out the function of these rooms and to understand how these people lived. And over there in A6 area, we may even have evidence of cultic activity. An altar, maybe some offering bowls, figurines, and things like that. And one of our grad students, well, Caitlin, you've already met, is going to be working on the interpretation of that room. Our third area, the fortifications area, has helped us understand the development of the site. So at one time, we believe this was an exterior wall. And then when the city expanded to the east, it became probably a precinct wall still in use. Initially, it was just one of those 2 major walls, and then it was turned into a double wall, a casemate wall, we call it, with intensive additional labor fortification effort, divided then into spaces in the lower of those rooms. We found a lot of weaving implements, the loom weights, and that's interesting. These spaces could be used for storage and perhaps for industry during times of peace, at least. And then later it was turned into just a series of towers. So we have, again, phasing.
And one of our students is studying those loom weights, right?
That's
Jamie,
right. Jamie,
Bennett.
Jamie Bennett is doing her thesis on the loom weights.
So these archaeological projects seem to generate theses, master's theses, right?
They do. It's a great way for archaeological project to research and publish through the efforts of our grad students.
Yeah. Very much so. Good. Kent, thank you. And I think, yes, I think we shift to Ataruz.
All right.
So you're welcome to stay, or unless you have a test. Do they have a test tonight?
Well, we have an exam reviews.
A
for
review,
their
that might
test.
matter.
All right.
Thanks, Kent.
Mhm.
Appreciate it. So I'm going to stand in for Chung-Ho Ji, who is the Dean of the School of Education at La Sierra University, who is under the weather. And so I might ask Larry Garrity to bump in here a time or two on one or two of the items. But I'm going to give a brief report on some of the, in so many ways, extremely exciting discoveries at the site of Ataruz. It's located, as you can see now, the name is on the other side of the Dead Sea, but the triangle is in the right place. I moved it over there because we've got another name to go into that space. So in any case, and it is a site that's right along a ridge running almost north-south, but it's kind of tilted to the northeast. And it drops off on the right-hand side. You can see that it drops off precipitously, and that goes down to wadis, to these dry riverbeds that end up in the Dead Sea. It's not too far from the Dead Sea. And so, and then off to the other direction, toward the east and south, are fields. So it's agricultural. The importance of this site, though, rests in the fact that it appears to be primarily, and Chung-Ho Ji is going to have to, he may want to send in a chat message if I'm mistaken this, but it seems to be primarily religious, that is cultic. We use that word cultic. And one of the things that tells us that, well, the architecture tells us that, and so do the finds themselves. For instance, a couple of notes here by way of architecture. This was excavated maybe a decade and a half ago, and is the main section of a temple. And if one could look at the far end of this room right in the middle, there is an altar here. There is a hearth off to the left. I'm not sure if this is a standing stone in the shadow or not, but in any case, these are architectural elements that shout religious. This is a temple, and from the 8th and 9th century BC, and it's something that Chung-Ho Ji has spent several years excavating. Another element, okay, so that's architecture. Another element would be the finds themselves. This bull represents an image, an icon that shows up everywhere at the site. There is a cistern, one of these bell-shaped cisterns that was carved out of the limestone and then lined with plaster. And in lining it with plaster, there's a large face of a bull with its horns right on the wall of the cistern. There are what we call kernoi or kernos with bull figures. There are bowls with bull figures on them. This was a religious site. And it would be nice to have had Chung-Ho here to talk about whether there is domestic housing or not. I think he's still looking for that, but we'll keep thinking about that and working toward it. And then one of the really impressive finds from recent excavations, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, is this incense stand, which is on its side. It would be standing up vertical, but it's on this side because there's an inscription on it. And this is an inscription that has been translated and published. And Larry, you may need to join me for this. You've read this article, I think, more recently than I have. So do you recall what this inscription was about?
I honestly have forgotten. I didn't know I'd be speaking
No,
about this,
no.
but I agree with you that it's extremely important to find an inscription of any kind, and to find it in a cultic context. It's got to have something to do with the worship that was going on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Chung-Ho has been insistent for years that we turn to the biblical text and to the Moabite stone, to the Mesha inscription, the stela. And the Mesha inscription mentions this site.
Mhm.
So does the biblical text, as Atta wrote.
Mhm.
Um,
And
and
that's different from the other two sites that we've been talking about, right? We've
Correct.
suggested, both the Mary and Balua, there's suggested names for them, and one could argue this, that, or the other, but there's nothing certain. But this practically certain that this one is mentioned in the Bible and we know
Yeah.
the name.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty much inescapable.
Yeah.
And then the connections here, if this is true, then you have at least some tribal elements identified as Israelite,
Mhm.
Gadites,
Mhm.
and living here. And the question about, okay, have we found something of their worship, or is this later Moabite? And if it's earlier, the question is, were Israelites using these bull figures? If it's later, then we can excuse that. But
Mhm.
then why the Hebrew references even on this text? And this is a Moabite inscription, but still.
Mhm.
So the questions are many, and we'll keep looking to Chun Ho to help us.
Right. Exciting site.
Exactly. It is a very exciting site. So I'm going to then move to another report. And this will be the fourth one, but there's a plus factor, there's a bonus one, okay? But this is the fourth one. And that is the Madaba Regional Archaeological Museum project, which began a couple of decades ago, but kind of had a new lease on life in 2015 when it became an American, Italian, and Jordanian consortium working to build a new archaeological museum in Madaba, Jordan. And what I'm going to do is just mention a couple of recent updates, but then I want to focus on two primary and wonderful examples of children's education in cultural heritage. Now I've added Madaba. We could put Hespan, we could put Jalul, we could put a lot of things from earlier days too, but just so that you can see how international and how many partners and stakeholders there are in this project. Of the Madaba Regional Archaeological Museum project, I show this slide. One of the things that we've done from the very beginning of this project is to focus on community archaeology, which means to establish connections with and partnerships with members of the community groups. We have stakeholder groups all the way from government to local business, shop owners, and so on. And the picture you see here is a very happy picture because we're eating at, I think, what is the best restaurant in Jordan, Harat Jadudna in Madaba. This is actually a smaller group than usual because this picture was taken maybe a week after the Israel-Gaza conflict began. And while people in Jordan didn't feel threatened, they did feel that they needed to stay closer to home. And so a lot of people simply felt uncomfortable coming. What we did was to have a meeting, an hour-long meeting, but we met in an adjoining room here. We stepped out of the room and met the person on the right here that you see right on the front here. This gentleman who's sitting at the head of the table here. He was wandering around in the restaurant when we came out, and he knew some people. And so he came over and somebody said, well, why don't you just stay for dinner? And so I'm paying. I say, of course, join us. Turns out he is a journalist. And he has now picked up a new cause, and that is the Madaba Regional Archaeological Museum. And he says, I'm the kind of journalist, I don't use the soft hand touch. I use my elbows to get things done. So anyway, we'll see what happens. We'll see what that means. But there are several other people sitting at the table here, some of them longtime Madaba residents, others members from other places. The person on the left at the head of the table is our site steward, has been since we began in the mid 2010s, and continues to be working for us, as do people at the other end of the table. A new addition that we just began in October, Barbara Anglis, who you see here, the right side of the left picture and the left side of the right picture. She is a specialist in taking surveys. She's an anthropologist. And what she's doing is doing a survey. It's an extensive survey to find out what people in Madaba actually want in a museum. We could come in, we think we have good ideas, but we really have to listen to what the people who live there have to say and what they would like to see. So this was a really productive time. Barbara and I were there in October for about 10 days, and she saw lots of people, as you can see in these pictures. Another entity that has become a partner, and this the first one of the education, of the two educational components that I want to mention, the Petra National Trust. That doesn't sound like an educational entity, but that is primarily what they do, and they're really good at it. And so we joined them because we have 2 floors, they're not large floors, but 2 floors dedicated to children's education in the new museum plans. And so they are our provider. And we've done some pilot programs already. You'll see in these next pictures. These, I think this is our first group. You see them lining up outside of the museum, where they'll be coming in and doing their workshop. It's a 3-hour workshop, and they're there. They do all kinds of projects. They are doing some hands-on things. In the picture on the left, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner the teacher, Huda Amarin, a terrific teacher who's able to get age groups. We had 3 different groups here, and she had these, actually 4, got all of these age groups entirely interested in archaeology and how to preserve their own cultural heritage. That was our goal. The other group is the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. I did not know this until I was contacted by them. This is the largest children's museum in the world. And they wanted to set up a new exhibit on religions of the world. And they picked 6 religions, and they chose 6 cities to represent those. Madaba, Jordan, is the one representing Christianity because of a long history during what we call the Byzantine period of church building, and it was an expansive time of settlement history, and so it became really important for Madaba, and Madaba was selected. And so here is an article in the Jordan Times about this when several of us were there in Indianapolis to celebrate the opening. This is the entry to the exhibit. When we learn about the religions of our neighbors here and across the globe, we're better able to understand and communicate with one another. That was their theme, and it was spectacular, the exhibit, and it was absolutely incredible to work with this group of people. Okay, the 5th one, and I don't have any slides to follow up on this, but the 5th one is a place called Wadi Faynan, which is in the southern part of Jordan. So you can see now that the footprint of La Sierra and of the Center for Near Eastern Archaeology has spread quite widely. We are coming to be known as Little Jordan, and we certainly have collections of research material here, larger than anywhere in the world outside of Jordan. So it's been really exciting to watch this grow. Tom Levy from the University of California, San Diego, did several projects, about 20 projects over about 20 years. And all of his research material is now on our campus at La Sierra. And so research continues. Ian Jones at New York University is leading that effort. Sean Eccles, curatorial research assistant here at the center, and MA student, is working with him. So we have this long list of projects that we're working on, and we need to stop and take some time for Q&A. So Larry, pull over here with me.
Let me just say that the 3 clusters there come from the 3 Iron Age kingdoms mentioned in the Bible. The one that you've just been talking about at Wadi Faynan is Edomite. And when you go up north to Balua, that's Moabite. And those other sites are Ammonite, right?
That's the biblical record.
That's
and they tend to be border because the pottery, the archaeological sorts of comparisons seem to push them more toward the Moabite. But yeah, border. We're talking about border. So, righto. Okay, so I'm going to scoot out of this. You can see now some contact information should you have questions. Okay, so Larry, here we are. What kinds of reflections, thoughts do you have and from this presentation? And then let's take some questions. Don may have some from the chat box. Let's see what we've got.
Well, I'm impressed just from the short descriptions that you've given us, aided by a few others, that Jordan is revealing its riches in a way that I don't know of any other university with the same breadth and depth of materials than La Sierra for this part of Jordan. I mean, there are many other projects that
Good
come-
projects,
good
lots of
projects from fine universities, but they're not 50 years old. They haven't produced the volume of material that we have. And I hope that the people who are watching and participating will all be able to visit the site where we're sitting and see the library, the collections, the students who are eagerly working on various projects and so on.
Right.
I think La Sierra is doing a great job. So I'm sure the people online who have been supportive of this project, some of them have donated. And that brings us, I suppose, to the point of our getting together tonight, because it is a fundraising event, isn't it? And many of these people who are online have already generously donated, and we're grateful for that. Perhaps others haven't, and I know that you're telling them how they can donate. But maybe there's some questions that arise out of the people who've been listening and watching. Do we have anybody?
So Don, what do we have?
If you could go back to the slide, the last slide that shows the map and the location of the sites.
Just a second. There we go. Okay.
Using your pointer, could you point out the locations of Hesban and Jalul as well?
Good. Hesban is to the west of Ameri. So it's probably, I mean, that triangle probably ends up covering part of Hesban. And Hesban is right north of Madaba. So even if I move this triangle over a little bit to the left, but it's between Madaba, and then Tel el-Ameri is north of it, but a little northeast too. So it's up here. And then Tel Jalul, did we want that too?
Yes.
Okay, so Tel Jalul is 5 kilometers east of Madaba. Those are the 3 major sites of the Madaba Plains Project. So La Sierra is one of the primary sponsors. Andrews University is the other. Andrews has been carrying on work at Hesban and at Jalul. So, and Ameri has been primarily under the rubric of La Sierra.
And we might say that those 3 sites are in what the Hebrew Bible calls the Mishor. There's a name for it. So, and the Madaba Plains Project is our name, but in the Bible it's called the Mishor.
That's the plain, right?
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of debate about even the plains of Moab,
Right.
and whether it should be down kind of north and west of Mount Nebo toward the Dead Sea. And people would argue for that, but that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, but people argue for that. And I've forgotten all the arguments pro and con, but Mishor has to do with the plain.
Yeah.
So.
And while we're waiting to see if any other questions pop up, I actually had a number of questions, if you don't mind my asking.
Of course.
So regarding LRAP and the UC San Diego collection, Doug, could you just maybe speak a little bit more about the potential research opportunities that we have with that collection?
Yeah, it is so massive. It is, I think Tom Levy said it's somewhere between 30 and 35 tons of material. And the reason is that they collected everything. I mean, a lot of the weight is from slag. This is one of the absolutely major copper production areas of the ancient world. I think in some time periods more than Cyprus, which is the name Cyprus means copper because of mining there. And then there's another major site across the Araba to the west in Timna. But in any case, so a lot of material associated with copper mining and smelting. And so the smelters, the slag, of course, we've got tons of slag, but people study that. We had a person here from UCL also, so University College London, And she was studying some of the slags material. We are attempting right now, Ian Jones and Sean Eccles in particular, to organize everything so that we can actually make it available online for anybody to access, so that we can, and then have more people coming and doing research. It's a lot of it has to do with the smelting and the mining processes, but there were other settlements. There were settlements there. I mean, if you look at 20 sites, there are settlements of different characters. One settlement had an Iron Age cemetery. We have that whole collection of burials, and people will be studying those for the future. And we have to be careful with human remains, of course, and these are all carefully documented, and that means with the Department of Antiquities as well. So ceramic remains, different kinds of stone. We actually have now, we keep it in the hallway of the center, a stone. It's about a foot, 15 inches tall. That is a standing stone, a small standing stone, which we think is early Edomite or something like that. The Edomite, there's a big debate about the Edomites and where they were and when, but in any case, that seems to be related to them. So,
And it has rudimentary features
it does.
on it.
It does.
Facial features.
It does. So a whole range of types of artifacts, and research ongoing, but we've got to get them organized. That's part of why we do our stint on Giving Day, because this kind of research demands ongoing support. So, you know, we'll keep working on it. Thank
And
you.
it's an interesting question why a fully funded state university in California would choose to give their entire collection to La Sierra University. So to ponder that, they must have confidence and faith in what's happening here at CNEA.
Yeah.
Let's move back up to MRAMP then. Is there an estimated date for the groundbreaking for the museum?
Yeah, we actually do. It's just as soon as we have a large donation. So it means we're looking at this museum it's going to cost about 7 million US, which is not so bad. In Jordan, it's much, much less expensive to build. But of that 7 million, 1 million will be an endowment to keep operations going. And then 1 million is actually for overruns. So we are budgeting 5 million to build this museum. And once I actually thought I would have in hand by October a kind of a promissory note from the U.S. Embassy. They've got a special grant program, and we were looking at a good share of that 5 million or $7 million, and that's what it takes. Put that into the hands of the Minister of Tourism and the Director of the Department of Antiquities. These are all our friends. They want us to be successful, but they can't commit the government to anything until we've got something to start it. But we do want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Larry, for helping us walk through discussion and Q&A and so on. And thank you for coming. I know you've been busy, and you're busy with another museum too, so thank you for that. And Caitlin, thank you for joining us for this and for being part of the CNEA team. Would you have anything to say about this Giving Day and why we're here?
Yeah, absolutely. So Giving Day is so important for CNEA because we at the center rely on donations. We have assistance that we can provide students in the form of scholarships and employment here at the center, which gives them a fantastic opportunity to be able to handle our amazing collection. We have our continued inventory and curation of library donations, which we have been so generously gifted, including a donation that you just went to San Diego yesterday to pick up. So we have so much that we would be absolutely honored to be able to accept it and provide for our students here.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Larry. And thanks to all of you, Don, for your help, and to all of you for joining us. We will say goodbye. Good evening. Thanks again.